That's my cat Olive.
Oh no, don't tell me.
No, no, she's fine. She's a bit grumpy at the moment, but she's alright. That's Olive. That's 3 days after the February earthquake. And we thought that Olive had died, and you'll understand why when you see some of the other photos we've got, but she didn't die. She went to ground for 3 days, as cats do. And I spent quite a bit of time wondering, as I was walking around the remains of my house, how long it would take before I could smell a dead cat under all the bricks. And so we were terribly excited when Olive came home, and that's about 10 minutes after she appeared home. She disappeared up into the hills where we lived, and that's her. So it's kind of a photo that is a reminder of her resilience, I suppose. So this thing that you're doing is on resilience. What I've done is I've got a piece of paper that you, it's like a little light room. I need something like that.
I want to write it in my book. Can we just check?
Okay, so that's Olive. So she's fine and well. But she's right at this moment, she's in a cattery. She's a bit grumpy about that. She's okay. Now I just have to go and find some other photos for a second. I'm on the internet, aren't I? Yep. So on the February earthquake, as we were all sitting out there, and everything seemed to be fine here at school, I was out there with all the students, and I'd been in the car park, and the first that I kind of realised that something wasn't too good was that while I was out in the car park out there ferrying parents to pick up students over here, one of the police came in. And he said, oh, is everything okay? And I said, yeah, we're all fine. I said, no, the school's fine. All the students are out here on the grass, as you all were. And he said, oh, good. He said, where's the principal? And at that stage it was Mrs. Welsh. And I said, no, she's out there. Everything's okay. We're fine. And he said, great. He said, look, I just wanted to see that you're all right. I've got to go. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, everything all right? And he just looked at me, ashen-faced and white, and said, no. He said, the city's a mess, and he said there are multiple deaths. And that was the first that any of us here at school knew. I was kind of the first one, and so I was quite shocked at that. And so I came back out here and told Mrs. Welsh and a few other people. And that was actually the first that we knew that there was a problem. And so I thought, oh, that's okay. It's nothing to do with me. Here we are, we're all at school, we're all safe. I couldn't get hold of one of my children, but I wasn't too concerned about that, and I thought, oh, it's terrible, I guess we'll hear. And when he said multiple deaths, I thought, maybe 10, but of course later on we heard there was a lot more. So we're out here, and I couldn't get hold of one of my kids, and so I rang my friend in Wellington on a normal phone who works at the correspondence school, and the normal phones worked, as you know, all your cell phones got all locked up, and I rang one of my friends, and she managed to get hold of my daughter because she could sit in her office in Wellington and watch the internet and was telling us what was going on. So I was over in my office doing that and relaying information out here. By about 3 o'clock it became really obvious that the eastern suburbs, that is right around the east, right around the sea, were badly hit by the earthquake. And so the teachers who lived in the eastern suburbs, of which I'm one, were told that we could go home. That was a major mission, because being a bit of a twit about filling up my car with petrol, I didn't have very much in there, and I thought, oh my God, I better go and get some petrol. Well, it took me about an hour to find a petrol station. I had to go right down the end of Lincoln Road to find a petrol station. And I live in Mount Pleasant. Now, if you don't know where Mount Pleasant is, if you've ever been to Sumner, you come around the estuary, and just before you get onto the causeway, going across to the causeway that goes across, I live in the hills up above there. And So I thought, okay, so I got my petrol. By this stage it must have been about 4:30, I suppose. I found out that my kids were okay, so that was my main issue. And I knew they are fleetingly university students, they're not a huge amount older than you. One's at that stage, one was 19, one was 21. And I knew that they would make their way home, so I thought, well, whatever happens, they'll probably be at home. So it took me about 3 hours to get home, and the closer that I got to the eastern suburbs, the worse everything became. The streets became really bad, we couldn't go down Ferry Road, there was gridlocks of cars everywhere, there were holes in the road, there were cars down in the holes, and I thought, oh God. So I had to go right round, you may not know, but the Heathcote Valley, which is near the tunnel going into Littleton. We had to go right round that way, so we go right across the city, right round the hills, and it took 3 hours to do it. And as we got round there, you know, people were there was a lot of people crying. It was just horrible, really. But I didn't sort of think too much. I thought, oh, yeah, okay. And so finally, I got sort of through the valley and going round into Mount Pleasant and up the hill. And I'd gone up a different part of the hill to what I normally go up because I had to come down through the back. And I came down my road, which is Major Hornbrook Road, and I could see my house, and it looked absolutely fine. So it was the back of the house. It's a brick house, a big old brick house. It was built in the 1950s, and it looked fine. And I heaved a huge sigh of relief and thought, great. However, I drove up the driveway, and this is what I saw. And that's what I saw, the bricks, the house had pretty much collapsed. Here is a conservatory, and I'll show another one of that in a minute, but most of the bricks had come off the top of the house. That had just, because the spur where we live, it's sort of like a hill like that, and the earthquake had come down through that spur, and the house has been lifted up and smashed back down, and then like in a washing machine. And so an old house like that, for the old house like that, it just fell to pieces. And that was the first I knew, so I got home about 6 o'clock, by which time it was pretty cold, and there was the remains of my house and my kids sitting on the ground crying, both of them, how old they were. So there we were, sitting there, this part of the house here, which is the dining room and the kitchen. Pardon?
Did you go inside?
We did, yeah. After we did, but that part there, which is sort of the kitchen, the garage is under there, so it's the garage and basement and stuff. This is the lounge room, and this is the dining room and the kitchen sort of behind there. Well, that sort of an add-on, I guess, was added on some years ago. That had pretty much completely separated from the rest of the house. Normally, when you go into this house, you go in through the conservatory. And you go, I'll see if I can find a good one of the conservatory, because I spend a lot of time in the conservatory, and 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which is when this happened, if I'd been in the conservatory or anywhere near my house, I wouldn't be standing here today. This line that you can see here, the front door is there, so you go up the stairs, there, and out into the deck, and then into the conservatory and the front door. This line here is the roof of the conservatory, and it's a piece of concrete about that big. So if I'd been in the lounge room and this had happened, and I don't know what I would have done now, I know what I'd do, I'd never go outside, but if I'd gone anywhere near the conservatory or the deck or outside the house, I would have been killed. If I'd been in the hallway, sort of at the back of the house, the hallway that runs down the middle of the house, I'd have been fine, but I would have been killed. You can see the damage that it's done to the house all of a sudden, so you can imagine what the kitchen looked like. Everything was broken. The microwave that had been in a piece of wall, something like that, plugged in, had unplugged itself and shot from one side of the room to the other. Everything that could break had broken, all the dishes had fallen out of the cupboards. The only dishes that were okay were a few that were in the dishwasher. Everything else had broken. So it was very difficult. We weren't sure whether we should go inside or not because the hills were still incredibly unstable and shaking every moment. So the kids and I sort of stood there in a state of shock, and the neighbours were all round, and similar things had happened to their house, but there were only about 3 of us whose houses had completely blown apart, mine of which was one. Of course we looked for the cat, and we couldn't find her, and the back of the house where she probably would have got out, I can just kind of show you around the back of the house where there were, just everywhere all the bricks had fallen off, so we thought that she was under the rubble somewhere. We thought that she was kind of under the rubble, and there was just piles and piles of bricks everywhere. So that was what we went home to. So we suddenly had to think about how do we deal with this, and because I'm someone who thinks, well, I've got to deal with this quickly, the way that I dealt with it was to go into complete overdrive. And so I went inside and got enough things that I could get, and went and stayed with a friend. But I guess what you do is you think, okay, what have I got to do? Well, I did. What have I got to do? So over the next 2 or 3 days, I found a lock-up. We then had to think about how we could get any furniture that was salvageable out. And of course the soft furnishings like your couches, your beds, they were pretty much okay. And that was about all that was okay. I had to keep it together because of the kids. I couldn't get too emotional and upset because I've got two young people who were reliant on me and looking to me for their support for them because they had lost their home. Even though they're students and living, as you will, away from home, that's their home, that's where they grow up, and that is their home. So they were pretty shattered about what had happened, and waiting for me to have a mental meltdown, I think. What did I do practically? My neighbours and I got together and we got lock-ups in the Heathcote Valley for our stuff. We worked out how we were going to get all our stuff out. What it did do in the Mount Pleasant, and still has in the Mount Pleasant area, because Mount Pleasant is pretty decimated. It's called the forgotten suburb at the moment. I'll explain to you why that is. We all got together and it was a time of a very surreal time. Some of us didn't even know each other. I didn't even know the people across the road. They're an elderly couple and I didn't know them. And now, every time I go up there, I go and see them. The people behind me, we are very close friends. They haven't got any family here. They're also quite elderly. And so my son and my daughter and their flatmates and students from the university, they all came out and helped. And we worked out how the only way that we could get the stuff out of the house was like this. I think what it has done, it has made us as a community very close, and that I think that once we all go back to where we are, that will. Oh wow! So that's the lounge window, and that's really the only way that we could get any of the big things out. They had to come out through. We smashed the rest of that glass out, and they had to all come out down through there. So you can imagine there's no way that I could have done this myself. No. So I had to rely big time on other people to help me. All the time, there's a lot of shakes carrying on. All the time we had helicopters that were really low over the